Okay, so I guess we can get started soon. Uh, Give me a second. Um,
Can everybody hear me? Yes? Okay, sounds good. So, my name is Catherine, and I'll be the moderator for this event. I'm a student at Harvard right now studying CS, and I'm also very excited to hear what our panel has to say today. So, I guess we can have an introduction from each of our panelists now. I guess we can start with Claire.
Cool. Hello, my name is Claire. I'm currently a graduate student at Harvard in the biodesign lab. I'm also a co-founder at Aura Blue. So Aura Blue is a hardware femtech company. We make a mattress pad that can detect and prevent hot flashes for women experiencing menopause. I started Aura Blue actually while I was finishing up my undergraduate at MIT, and I've been working on it since then.
Okay, wonderful. And now, Brittany?
Hi, everyone. So I'm Brittany Davis. I am a general partner at Backstage Capital.
Oh, Brittany, I can't hear you. I don't know if...
Oh,
Can
is
everybody
anyone
else
else?
hear Brittany? Oh,
Is it-
okay.
I can hear her. Yeah.
Okay, it seems like everyone else is good. So I'll just pick up
Yeah.
where I left off. Yeah, so hopefully everyone can hear. I'm a general partner with Backstage Capital. Backstage, we're a venture fund, and we were founded to invest explicitly in founders that have been left out of the venture ecosystem, unfortunately, due to just being overlooked. When we started, what we kind of saw was that as much as 90%, maybe even more, of venture capital is going to effectively white men, right? So we were looking at, why is it that, women, people of color, LGBTQ founders are not receiving venture capital? And, the answer really is that a lot of VC was just missing out on a lot of really good high potential founders, and we could be that VC that could, support founders early and throughout their journey. So we were founded by our founding partner, Arlen Hamilton, and she's really created a pretty big voice and movement around what we call underestimated founders. So we started the fund in 2015. We invest in pre-seed, so very early companies, kind of in that first fundraising round, up to Series A companies, all led by women, people of color, and LGBTQ founders. We invest in all types of industries, and yeah, me personally, just thinking about like some of my background before venture. So I actually joined venture because I had a startup and kind of saw how my experience was in raising capital, and that kind of started my path in venture. And before that, I was in a very traditional finance role. So combining kind of all of those experiences led me to this role. And yeah, happy to be here and discuss all the above.
Wonderful. And then I think we can go to Justine.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Justine. I was a professional ballerina, and then I was a banker, and then I was a VC, and now I'm an operator. I'm head of strategy, business development, and governance at a Series A crypto startup, and I'm also an investor in an investing DAO, which is a different structure for a syndicate, and we invest in female and non-binary crypto founders. When I was doing venture, I worked with First Round, Samsung Next, a deep tech venture fund called Playground Global, and some others.
Sounds great. And then our last speaker, is it Gosia?
It's Gosha.
Okay,
Yeah.
Gosha. Thank you. So, do you want?
Great to be here. Gosha Karas, I'm an investment director at SoftBank, where I lead opportunity funds, growth stage investments. That's typically defined as Series B to Series D within that part of SoftBank. Opportunity Fund was launched in mid 2020, so we were a little bit more latecomers to the diverse investing space than Brittany and her team. And we invest in extraordinary founders who happen to be Black, Latino, or Native American. So our mandate is somewhat similar in terms of the underlooked population that we're trying to serve, but it's purely racial. So this is literally the only criterion that we use, as we are looking at the top of the funnel, and then we invest in the companies that meet certain thresholds of being amazing. Prior to launching Opportunity Fund, I helped launch our Latin America fund within SoftBank. So a very similar theme. We saw the opportunity where I guess mainstream Silicon Valley didn't all that much. We built this into an $8 billion fund over the last 3 years, dedicated exclusively to the region. Prior to SoftBank, I started my career at Bain & Company. I did my PhD in finance back in Poland, where I am from. And then I did my MBA at HBS, hence the Harvard connection. And directly before SoftBank, I worked for a private equity firm in New York.
Okay, sounds good. So I think for now we'll just go into some of our Q&As, the Q&A section where we've prepared a few questions that we're curious about and want to ask our panelists. And so first, for speaker-specific questions, Justine, can you talk to us about your past work with early-stage venture firms? And can you also tell us a little about your shift in focus from digital currency to now to digital currency in current years?
Sure. So on the early stage investing side, I actually ran the San Francisco team of something called Dorm Room Fund. So we were a student-run venture fund that invests in student founders. Obviously, we have a Boston team as well that I think is very active at Harvard. And then, like I mentioned, that fund was kind of backed by First Round. So I got to work with First Round on some projects. And then I worked at a Series A venture, primarily Series A deep tech fund called Playground Global. And that was extremely technical things like quantum computing and aerospace, et cetera. But that was all kind of early stage. On the crypto side, I got into the space in early 2017 and was involved in a variety of ways, doing everything from grant-funded research to helping Samsung build out their Web3 investment thesis in 2019. I worked with World Economic Forum on the policy side, United Nations on the standard setting side. I've worked with a bunch of venture funds in the space. I've started DAOs. I've helped Berkeley mint the first NFT that was minted by a university, et cetera, and then went full-time into the space this past summer and work at a Series A company called Rabbit Hole. And so what we do there is teach users how to use different protocols, and then in exchange for learning how to use, say, Uniswap, which is an exchange, they would get the Uniswap token. And then over time, we can help them demonstrate that they have certain knowledge, let's say, about DeFi or NFTs or DAOs through on-chain credentials.
Okay. Yes, that sounds very good. And then I guess, Gosha, can you explain the work you do at SoftBank? I think how is that different from what you've worked on in the past with consulting and private equity?
Sure. So I invest in growth stage companies, and the idea behind what does even growth stage mean is essentially we're not really underwriting just the founder and the team and the idea and the large market anymore. It's more execution and further growth. So the question that I am asking myself when I invest is there already enough traction that the business has demonstrated that it clearly works, and it's all about then in the subsequent months and years, taking it to the next level and building a really sustainable company out of it. Versus earlier stage investing tends to be more founder is great, has an amazing idea, and is building the business in the initial stages. So I focus on the execution. Now, in terms of how it differs from consulting and investing, it's actually quite different, and other kinds of investing, it's actually quite different. So in consulting, you predominantly advise to either management of a company or to an investing firm that is your client, which is considering making a certain investment or acquisition. So as a consultant, you have no decision-making power. They can listen to you, they can look at the analysis you prepared, but they don't necessarily need to take the decision the way you recommended. And you never really have any ability to control what happens later either. You're not an owner of the asset in any way. In investing, it's very different because you do influence the decisions, and depends on the firm how quickly you can start to do so. But in firms with great culture, already associates have an influence on whether a certain deal will be pursued, and they're asked to voice their opinions. And then, of course, as you progress in your career, become partner, that's when you take the full ownership of a deal. So it's very different in that sense that you are the decision maker as the investor. Now, within investing space, there are different strategies essentially, right? Like I'm doing growth investing now. Private equity tends to be typically taking majority stakes in mature companies who would typically be growing, say, 5 or 10% year over year. They're not expected to double or triple their size or their revenue. And you typically lever the transaction. So there is some debt component that comes into it. So since there is debt, and the company tends to be more mature, there's relatively limited kind of margin of error, which means that the diligence that you're doing tends to be very detailed and very quantitative. Now, in venture world, it's different because you do expect the companies to grow very fast, right? And you're sort of trying to make a prediction still about what the world is going to look like, what people are going to buy, what products are going to change the world. So it's very different. I am personally, given my PE background, I like the numbers. So I would never really be a great early stage investor who is, not really able then to evaluate any sort of numerical data or meaningful numerical data. So I'm kind of somewhere in the middle, but definitely more on the venture side in that sense that we still expect the companies to grow super fast and conquer new markets and become massive.
I see. Thank you so much for that thoughtful answer. And I guess moving on, Brittany, can you talk about how you decided upon working at Backstage Capital and how underrepresented founders can establish themselves in the venture and startup spaces?
Yeah, I think this is a good contrast to what Gosha was sharing about kind of being on the growth side. So Backstage Capital, we're very early stage. So kind of absent of a lot of data points and looking at company history and traction, we're really trying to think about how that next 5 to 10 years could look in terms of our full return as an investor. But yeah, even more personally, I think about joining Backstage was a journey, like getting there, getting to venture, and I think a lot of people try to get into venture for different reasons, and I think a lot of particularly like women and people of color, and this is big generalizations here, but a lot of people in my community, I think, have even bigger ambitions more than just like the job. It like means something personally to us. So for me, it really struck me when I was a founder. So I was also at Harvard for business school years and years ago and started a company and tried to raise capital probably at the worst time you should ever raise capital because we were out of money. It was a B2B software product that we were building, and our client ran out of money. So we had no money, and I'm now trying to hit the fundraising path. And I realized that so much of fundraising was network based and really susceptible to kind of the investor's opinion of who can build a big company. So that opens itself up to so much bias. And I actually met with a VC as a founder in the Boston ecosystem. So fortunately, actually, as a current Harvard student at the time, I think people were taking meetings with me more so than maybe someone else who didn't have some of that as a credential or a community. So that's something to think about. And that if you're starting a company or thinking of working on one, people did take me more seriously maybe than another founder that didn't go to a Harvard school. So I got that first meeting, but even in the meeting, they would say, and this was more of an e-commerce product, investors would be like, oh, I don't know if data around fashion and e-commerce is that interesting. Let me ask my wife, my sister, my daughter. Like, if this is how decisions are being made in venture, and you look at me and then you think you have to, like, it's not a real problem, it's not a real I guess an issue that is venture backable, like an investable solution, this is problematic because you see me and you think either myself or the problem I'm solving doesn't fit venture. And venture at this point has only been defined by so many white men effectively. And we then are being overlooked. And a lot of the early stage problem is that so much of it is based on these intrinsic or subjective types of theories that VCs have, and not really data based. So, the growth stage and beyond, there's probably metrics to your business. I'm raising my first round of capital pre-seed as a founder. I don't have those metrics, and I'm relying on the VC to kind of, see the vision with me and like really buy into the fact that I can execute. And I think that was where I saw for myself the gap in, if we're leaving it up to VCs that cannot see the potential in founders that look like me, what if I'm that VC that can fund founders that look like me and actually just do it really well and make that my whole business? So that's what I actually set out to do. And I happened to meet our founding partner, Arlen Hamilton, who started Backstage. She had just started this fund, and we connected within probably about 6 months of her launching the fund. And I joined after she'd gotten started. But yeah, it was definitely a journey. But I think part of it was just seeing that gap from the founder side, that I know I wasn't being taken as seriously because I think of who I am, or even some of the market challenges I was solving, because VCs use kind of their own data points, not necessarily the data points from my business. But that's kind of the nuance of early stage investing. And I think, not to put like a big call to action for everybody, but I think that's something that's interesting for women to get more involved in on the investor side. It's really great that you brought this group together. But even if you're a founder or an investor as a woman in this space, you bring a lot of insight where, the current mainstream might not have the same experiences or vision into the, future markets, or from your perspective, how you see opportunity. And I think that's really valuable right now. So as an underrepresented person, I think there's a lot of value that you bring either as a founder or an investor. So yeah, it's pretty encouraging to be in the industry on either side at this time.
Thank you so much. Very inspirational answer. And I think next question, are you guys hearing an echo on my end, or is it just me? Okay, that's good.
Okay.
So I wanted to ask Claire, like, I think you mentioned that you were doing some work with women's healthcare products and things like that. I was wondering just like, I don't know how you got that idea, or how you saw that there was a problem that needed to be solved in that space.
Yeah, so it's kind of a long and convoluted story, but basically I was doing a hardware hackathon with a bunch of Hong Kong-based students and MIT students back in 2018, and we were kind of we were working on a climate problem. So a lot of energy goes into cooling the buildings in Hong Kong because it gets very warm there in the summer and even into the winter. And kind of as we were going down this rabbit hole, we started looking into kind of the disparity between like how buildings are cooled for like men and women, and like the kind of energy waste that goes into cooling a building like to a temperature for like, a 40-year-old male in a suit. And kind of like going down this rabbit hole, we arrived at this problem of hot flashes. in older women, and we realized it was a very underserved market. So I think there's kind of this perception from the general populace that, you know, the type of woman who experience a hot flash is generally older, like might not have a job, and that it's more of like a psychological or a minor problem that just happens as these women age. But we found that it's actually quite severe and quite understudied. Even OBGYNs don't have like a very clear cut requirement for knowing about hot flashes in menopause, and most only go through, like, if anything, a couple of days of training. So, and we also realized that this kind of this market of women were actually like 50-year-old women at the peak earning time, like in their careers. So for a lot of these women, hot flashes were like disrupting their sleep, like fraying their relationships, and leading them to like retire early or step back during the time of their lives where, like, as an employee or like as somebody with a corporate job, they were like the most productive, the most powerful, and like the highest earning. So I got very interested in this problem, and basically continued to look at it. I found some other co-founders from MIT, and yeah, we've been developing our solution since then.
Wonderful. So I think our next questions are just going to be general questions for, you know, all of our panelists. And so one thing that would be very interesting to know is like what has prepared you for pursuing your career in venture capital or at a startup? And it doesn't matter if this is your education, if this is how has Harvard prepared you, or just anything. Like, what do you think has prepared you the most for this career? I guess, you know, anybody can start if there's something you want to say, but
I can go first. I think I'm kind of like, you know, in the middle of it right now. We're like, you know, in the middle of like, you know, raising around and all of this stuff. And so my education as an undergraduate was in mechanical engineering, which in no way prepared me for like the business side of things. And also didn't quite prepare me to, you know, do the full product development cycle, like from the ground up. I think what was most helpful for me was kind of like extracurricular events. I worked for a lot of startups during my undergraduate, at least half a dozen, like focused on like very diverse areas, and being able to know those founders and know other femtech founders before I even had the idea for my startup was very helpful and very useful.
Yeah, I'll pick up on that. Because similarly, fortunately, Claire, it sounds like your business is going much better than mine did. I ended up essentially failing at the business, but I met a ton of other founders, and even founders that I have actually been fortunate to invest in at Backstage. I met a lot of the founder community by being active as an actual founder. But either if you want to be an investor or a founder, I think just knowing other founders is helpful. So finding kind of that community there and being helpful to founders. So even as I was a founder and I was trying to make my way over to venture, a lot of it was making those connections. Kind of as I referenced in my prior comment, you know, if they were taking my email as, you know, hey, I have this startup, hey VC, I'm raising money, and we had that meeting and you didn't invest in me, I actually would then try to even refer them to another company potentially that I got to know through my founder kind of friend network. And I've stayed in touch with that network. It's now a community really of people, of other kind of underrepresented founders that have now gone on to do much, much better things in terms of founding their company and actually growing, and have now been on the investor side, bringing that community as a value add for me as an investor when I talk to potential, like if I was hiring or recruiting, thinking about getting a job, I now have a whole community of really high potential founders that that I know that are very investable, and that's something to think about if you're thinking of going to venture, just knowing founders to invest in. That's part of the something that can help in the getting the role.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's very, very different if you're doing late stage or early stage. I had a financial background and I did equity research and the CFA program and all of that. Those skills I think are more relevant for later stage. I liked earlier stage venture, so the best way for me to kind of build that new skill set was by doing it on a small scale. So I might not have had capital to deploy into companies, but I still met with a lot of founders and I would connect them to people that did have capital to deploy. So I think you need to do a lot of repetition, talk to a lot of founders, and start creating value for the people that you're interacting with, kind of on whatever scale you can. But I think you can then use that to demonstrate that you know how to do the job. I also think like support groups with other people, other founders or other people that are kind of earlier in their venture careers are really important. There's not like any one playbook for how to do the job. So I think like exchanging lessons and approaches with people is helpful. And I do think venture is kind of like a business where it's very helpful to have like a mentor that you can learn from.
I think, and it's already pretty clear from the answers, even within this group, that there is no one path, and that's kind of the beauty of it, right? Because then, as you join certain teams or build them, people come with different backgrounds, and that's always very additive. Like there are those stereotypical paths, right? Either the finance path, or when you start in a consulting firm or in an investment bank. Maybe PE as I did, and then switch over to venture. And I agree with Justine here that this tends to be more common on the later stage investing side or growth. There are people who started as operators or founders, and that's a great path too, because it kind of teaches you empathy in working with founders later on. And this job is not really only about investing. Once the deal is done, there is the partnership period where you're trying to be as helpful as possible to the founder, and having that empathy and having been in a fast-growing company is definitely extremely helpful. And the networks that come with it as well. And then, since a lot of the audience is probably still in college or in grad school, you can there are people hiring fairly directly as well, and getting involved as soon as possible and as early as possible, and reaching out to folks who are already in venture and getting connected with them, and having your own thesis really on what's exciting to invest in, and pitching those theses can definitely help in making those connections mutually beneficial, and then leading to job offers as well.
Okay, now I turn my mic on. I think the next question that we want to ask is, I know you guys have all worked on a lot of different initiatives with a lot of different companies. You guys have very varied experiences, but like, what is the most interesting company or initiative you've worked with or on, and why? So like the most memorable or just the most exciting?
I could go first again. So as I mentioned before, I've worked with probably about a dozen different startups, not all of them like in a founding role, during my undergraduate and immediately after. So of course my favorite startup is my current one. And it's been really cool to be able to work with a lot of women who have seen this great negative effect in their life, and for the first time through the power of technology be able to offer a treatment that might work for them. But what I really like about startups and about entrepreneurship is it's kind of an adventure, and you never know where it's going to go. So through this, I've been able to travel to dozens of countries that I never thought I would see, and meet the wildest people. For a while, I was working on this venture that was focused on, helping refugees in refugee camps obtain healthcare. And it was actually started through a hackathon at the Vatican, which was super neat. And I got to go to all of these refugee camps throughout the world, which was really cool. It was really, I guess, humbling, and it was like sometimes really scary. I can think of a couple of times, probably most of the near-death experiences in my life have been probably in these camps. I've also had the opportunity to work with for a while with this vibrator company that was using machine learning to augment the vibrator experience, which was absolutely wild. And from an engineering perspective, nothing that I thought of before. So just the opportunity to explore all different things, I guess, is my answer.
So I can go next. It looks like I'll pick up there as well. So I think, okay, so there's a lot of companies that we've invested in now. So Backstage, just some more context, we've invested in 190 companies. So our strategy has really been using the capital that we have, but across a lot of companies. And one, I think, is because we had to. So when we were starting in 2015, we had to really prove this thesis that there really was this question of, are there enough women and people of color, et cetera, founding venture backable companies? So with our first funds, we were actually building out kind of the tracking and the pipeline to show that even if we're investing in only 1 to 3% of the companies that we see, there's still this giant pipeline of companies that are high potential. So that was kind of the case of why we had to build our own momentum and show that, wow, there's this huge, it's undeniable that this is a thesis that can be something that can return capital for our investors. So with all that said, in our early days, in 2017, we met a founder. Her name's Tammy. She's starting this company. It's called Carrot Financial. And it's effectively a financial product for fertility planning. So whether it's on the egg freezing or whatever your fertility journey might be, IVF, whatever that is, it can be incredibly financially draining for folks. And she thought of it as something that could be offered as an employee benefit. And she pitched us this idea, the partnership at Backstage, we loved it. And she was saying how much essentially pushback she was getting from a lot of kind of more mainstream VCs that really did not see this as a big enough problem to solve. Or why would that be something that employers would pay for? Or is this a viable business? She got all the pushback. So we ended up investing in her pre-seed round. Where this is exciting is coming kind of, I guess, full circle, but just last fall, she ended up raising a Series B round, completely oversubscribed, led by there's a fund that does a lot of growth rounds, Tiger Global, big kind of name funds, now saying that this is a thing. And, it's pretty cool to kind of see that journey, but that speaks to back to our thesis where we're catching companies and really backing them where other funds are kind of overlooking them, kind of in this place where so much of the decision making is based on gut feeling or the VC's kind of personal experience in this industry. So we have a unique vision by being a venture fund that is more diverse, and we think about industries in a very inclusive way. Seeing her go from VCs won't take a look at me to now, in a growth round that was very competitive. I think it's exciting for us as a fund. That's where we get returns, but it's also pretty cool just for the audience. I think there is a shift happening in the industry where people are recognizing more investment needs to be in women. First of all, women-led companies, but also markets that have been overlooked that affect women, particularly women's health. So that's just one that we're super excited about. Coming off of the end of last year, that was a big win for us, but also just kind of speaks to where we are as an industry. So it leaves me fairly optimistic.
I have worked on a bunch of different things. I'll just, I think, say why I think the things I'm working on now are important. So I work in Web3, which is a newer industry, and it's a more permissionless technology and approach than we've had before. So I think we have the opportunity. It's an opportunity, like we have to execute on it though, to have people involved that haven't been involved in the past, just because the barrier to participation is lower. It's kind of ours to mess that up though. So my biggest fear is that we just recreate problems that we have in our current systems in Web3. So I'm trying hard to prevent that from happening. So we have, I think, low diversity in crypto right now. So we're with Komorebi, it's called Komorebi Collective, trying to fund female and non-binary founders. I think crypto's like challenging. It sits at the intersection of both finance and engineering, which tend to have lower rates of like women and non-binary people in them to begin with. And then there's all these other barriers that make it more difficult to fundraise. So we're trying to work on that. And then at Rabbit Hole, we're trying to create kind of like a frictionless and permissionless way to teach yourself more or less how to use Web3. There isn't really like a well-established curriculum or certificates or credentials that exist for this. And so on Rabbit Hole, like you can come and gain this knowledge and these kind of like open source credentials on your own. And all you need is a wallet and some cryptocurrency in it. So hopefully we can create more of a meritocratic future of education and work.
It's really hard to pick for me as well. I guess what I will say that in terms of initiatives, what gets me personally really excited is when we come up with a new strategy and then pursue it. So again, LATAM was an example of that, very overlooked and with massive opportunities. And when we entered that market, the usual conversations you would have with the founders were around, we have built the company to a certain level, and now we're almost profitable, and we're like going to break even next year, and we're like almost there. And our perspective was like, why? Like, why would you even go for profitability so quickly? And the answer has always been there just hasn't been enough of growth equity money in that market. So we have to, because otherwise we can't really sustain the business. So this was really the reason, or a validation of the thesis that we had, that the founders might be there, the talent might be there, but if there is not enough capital, they kind of hit a wall in terms of growth opportunities, and we decided to fill in that gap. And that's something that's just super energizing, because then 3 years later, you see how different that landscape looks like right now, with other funds from the Valley, with crossover funds, including Tiger, coming in and really taking much closer look into the entire continent. So it has been quite transformational there, and we've been super, super proud to be leading that journey. And we kind of used a very similar approach while launching Opportunity Fund. So while it was really driven by the moment, and the decision to start Opportunity Fund was taken in like 48 hours in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder. And we just didn't want to be, yet another company that comes out with a press release and says, we stand with the groups that have been so affected. We wanted to do something that's very much core to our business, and at the same time pursuing the opportunity to make money in that space, right? Because as you guys may know, in venture, access to networks that are not necessarily already chased by a lot of people, and finding those theses that are not obvious is something that generates a lot of value and a lot of opportunity. So we thought about underrepresented founders in the US in a very similar way as underrepresented continents 2 years prior, where there is opportunity, and also, of course, at the same time, you can do something that's good while generate returns. So we've been super excited about it. We have about 70 or so companies within the portfolio. So we've been really busy. A lot of them are early stage, and those transactions have been led by my colleagues, and then a bunch is on the growth stage side. We have actually one that's when, as Claire was talking about her startup, reminded me a little bit. We invested in 8 Sleep about a year ago, which is an intelligent mattress company. I've been super excited about this deal since the first meeting with the founder. And his wife, actually, who is a co-founder of his, is a Latina woman. So completely, power couple building a business together. And we were just so, excited by the insight that they built the whole business on, being there's so much attention going to physical fitness with the Peloton, to nutrition, but nobody has really cracked rest yet. So them coming up with a product that not only measures the quality of your rest, but is able to automatically take action based on it and influence the temperature in which you sleep, plus making you rest better, was just a really unique product and unique insight. So we were super excited to get involved, and it's one of the companies we're really proud to partner with.
Thank you so much. So I think we're going to start opening up, the questions, the Q&A from all our listeners over here. So if anybody has questions, it'd be really great if you could drop it into the chat now or the Q&A section, so we can ask our amazing panelists, some more personal questions. I guess while that is, happening, I guess I can first kick it off by, while you guys think of your questions, I can ask a question. So I guess this is a broader question to all of you guys, but for example, I know, Justine, you actually did professional ballet for a few years. And I guess like for people who are trying to break into this, industry to start up and like venture and capitalists and things like that, because I think everyone comes from very different backgrounds, and we need more of that, right? I think is the theme of today's talk. Like, how would you go about doing that? Like, for example, Justine, how did you, make the transition from doing something that's pretty different from, finance or venture capitalists and move into it?
So the transition I had to do was actually from ballet to working in an investment bank. And those discussions were rough, basically. It was hard to go to banks and say, like, I used to be a ballerina and you should hire me now. So basically I did like a really horrible internship just to kind of get in the door. I had to do like 300 cold calls a day to try to get people to refinance their mortgage 4 years after the financial crisis. I was personally blamed for 2008 on those phone calls, but I did it for like 3 or 4 months. And then I had a bank on my resume. And then I just did the work after that, basically, and got a degree in finance and the CFA, et cetera. Going from working in like public markets to early stage venture was difficult in a different way. I didn't have a big network of founders. I didn't know a lot of people at startups. I hadn't worked at startup before. There are many different ways that you can kind of like create your path to venture. I used an MBA, which I did at Berkeley, to get me to the West Coast and connect me with other founders and just kind of like be in the thick of it. I did a lot of internships. I did 6 internships during my MBA, and just kind of like person by person built that network and got reps in. And so I don't know if that's an encouraging answer, but I basically just put a lot of work in.
No, totally. I don't think there's, a substitute for the hard work you have to put into in anything. But I guess do you guys want to talk about, I don't know, how you guys transitioned, or if you had to transition into venture capitalist or startup, or also if you have any just general advice for people wanting to get into this industry?
I would say start with something that really excites you about this, because going to venture for the sake of going to venture doesn't really make all that much sense. I think it's better to have a good reason, and that typically tends to be, I'm just so excited about how certain thing is being transformed, or how AI is changing the world we live in, or how crypto is a new paradigm, like those sorts of things. And then doing your research around it and building a thesis. It just makes you an interesting person to talk to. And the job of people who already are in venture is about talking to people and learning from their ideas. So it's easier to get them excited if you're coming in with some thoughts already built out.
Yeah, I think this question leads very well into the next one, which was asked in the chat. Like, what would you guys suggest about the risks that we might face while taking up a startup as a career path, rather than like a more traditional, more, I guess, safer route of like doing a 9 to 5?
Yeah. So I've been like, a participant in startups for a long time, especially, as an undergraduate, when you might not have as much income, and you're also trying to pay tuition. So I will say, like, especially starting off, and especially in like, slower startups such as hardware startups, there's definitely like a pretty big financial risk, in that you're kind of not going to be paid a lot for work that would be compensated a lot more generously elsewhere. Um, so, so I would say that's like probably like the main risk. But like, fortunately, if you can code, like it's, I hope it's pretty easy to like, pick up, if your startup fails. But even when you're in the thick of it, I can think of like our co-founders, like, just trying to cover like health insurance and like, the day to day. There's also, the big thing I found with startups is that, especially when you're interacting with mentors and VCs, there is no HR department. So as, a woman, or like, there will be harassment that you do not have a lot of recourse for, which can be very frustrating. So my CEO is very familiar with this because I vent to her all the time. Like, something will happen, and you just have to like kind of get over it. So I would say those are probably the two biggest risks, as far as I know.
Yeah, I think obviously like you need the financial means to be able to start something, like Claire mentioned. Like, it will be, in general, like your salary compensation will be lower than it would be in other places, but equity, whether that comes through carry as an investor or because you own the equity as a founder, is really the only way to get exponential outcomes. Even if that doesn't happen, let's say that the startup doesn't work out for whatever reason, you've still built something from nothing, which I think is the hardest thing in the world to do. And so having built like that, or developed that muscle, I think makes you extremely valuable in anything that you do afterwards.
Great. And I think another great question in the chat. So I think you guys all mentioned that, like, I think, this industry is, you need a great team of people, and that's one of the best parts, I think. And so I think Kavya asks, like, how can we find such a great team, or how can we go about looking for that? How did you guys meet your partners, or, meet your team?
So interestingly, at Backstage, so speaking of it as the fund, coming to this fund, our founding partner, Arlen Hamilton, who started the fund, she has a big presence on social media, Twitter in particular. I might be one of the only people on our team that did not actually meet her through Twitter. I actually met her in person, which it's so funny because whenever we tell the story of like our partnership, we have one other, it's a 3 partnership team. So we have one other GP. She actually connected with Arlen on Twitter. Arlen brought on her apprentice, who has now moved into a principal role, also on social media. So throwing that out there and that kind of building. And okay, so I'm saying this because social media does not come like easy to me. For some reason, the thought of like sharing my thoughts and stuff online is like a big hurdle. But I think in VC, there is a bit of like a value to that. To the points that were discussed, like so much of this is in really having an interesting thesis or perspective on the industry. And without experience, potentially, you might have to just build that yourself and build that kind of awareness about what you bring to the industry, maybe through blogging or I don't know, people TikTok. Literally, like I follow a couple of VCs on TikTok, Twitter. It is helpful. So there's something there. Again, I'm the only person on Backstage's team that is probably like the least social media savvy. But with that said, I met the team and met other folks. So I had a couple other roles in venture, all like with this thesis in mind. I met them in 2 different ways. I'd say one, it was in person through like so different events, in-person events, speaking about like I remember I hosted an event when I was at Harvard Business School on like basically bringing together Black VCs and Black entrepreneurs, and stayed in touch with a lot of the folks that came out of that event. So that's something else just to think about, is that it could be based on your thesis. If it's investing in women in Web3, that could be something that you can create a community around. I think that's something that I used within my thesis, just trying to figure out there's got to be people who are interested in investing in certain types of founders, and I know these founders. Let me like really try to build that community. And I did that more like in real life, where you can also do that very well online. And I found that that's something that in finding the people that you want to work with, whichever means you use, I think just leaning into that, connecting on like what drives you, what's interesting about why you're doing what you do, and you'll find those right folks.
Having the diligence on people that you're going to work with if you're thinking of starting a company with someone, or even if it's about joining a firm that already exists, you can get a lot of knowledge about how people work just by doing really your own background checks, finding people who know them or who have worked there before, and trying to understand the work styles, the passions, mutual compatibility, those sorts of things. Like there are ways to figure it out through just conversations, both directly and indirectly, that tends to really help.
Yeah, I met my co-founders they were my fellow MIT classmates, which was really fortunate because they have a very strong technical background, and that came in handy later on as we were doing a lot of engineering work. But yeah, not being on the same page as your co-founder, or choosing someone who you might have some kind of like difference in opinion with, is a really good way to have your startup fail very quickly, which is something I've witnessed in a lot of my friends' startups. So that's definitely a very important step.
Yeah, I would also say just like tell everybody you talk to what you care about and what you're working on, and then when they meet somebody that might fit the description of like who you need to add to your team, they'll think of you. And then I think the other thing that we try to do at Rabbit Hole is just make sure our values are really clear. And so then people kind of self-filter whether or not those values align with their own, and we are a team that they would like to work with. There's always in startups this like tension between like you need to add people to your team really fast because you can never do enough, and hopefully you're growing quickly. But I think be as picky as possible with your first like 10 to 20 hires, because they really set the, not just the foundation for the company, but also the culture. So I think be picky in the beginning, especially.
For sure. Thank you so much. I think you guys have all gave really, really amazing insights today. And it was, I don't know, I can't speak on behalf of everyone, but even as a moderator, I just found your answers so insightful and so helpful. I guess do you guys have any closing remarks or any last things that you want to say, or any future plans with your career or, your companies or anything exciting?
No, it was great hearing everyone's thoughts. It's always exciting to see kind of women in this industry, and it gives me hope that things are changing for the better.
Yeah, I was gonna second that. It leaves me a very optimistic place. Seeing, I guess we're all in kind of different places within the spectrum of venture, and have all shared really valuable kind of insights, whether it's more from the founder side or even getting into the space. I would say, just as if I'm coming from someone currently in school or thinking about either venture or startups, is just, I had a lot of imposter syndrome getting into this space, thinking I didn't have what it takes. This is after going to Harvard Business School, after working in investment banking, starting a company. Like, I still thought there were more boxes to check. Like, get involved. If you're interested in this, really dig into why and lean into that and kind of get involved. And I don't think I wish I knew that I didn't have to check any more boxes. Just actually talking to founders, starting a company. You can do more than you think, and don't let yourself hold yourself back, I guess. So yeah, just wanted to make a quick statement on that, because I think I would have gotten started much sooner if I could talk to my earlier self.
Okay, well, thank you so much to all of our speakers for, taking the time to be here with us today. And thank you for all of, the listeners, the participants as well. And, I think we've all had a great time, and it was so nice hearing from you guys, and, good luck in the future to everyone here. So thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.